You're listening to the ANEC Sports Podcast. The show starts right now. Hello, and welcome to a special edition of the ANEC Sports Podcast. My name is Sam Frick, and in this video, we are going to break down the Class 3A state championship game featuring the Norwell Knights and the Greensburg Pirates. Norwell representing the Northeast 8, Greensburg representing the Eastern Indiana Conference. And as you can see with this matchup, both of these teams, you look at them, they're both very similar for the most part. When you look at the overall matchup between these two teams, Norwell comes into this matchup 22-6. Greensburg coming in at 27-0. According to USA Today, Norwell is ranked tied for 9th. Greensburg ranked number 1 in USA. Greensburg also ranked number 6 in the coaches poll. Norwell not ranked, and then I saw Norwell was ranked, I believe, 9th in the AP polls in Class 3A. I think I mentioned that moments ago. But, you know, when you look at the narrative of the matchup between these two teams, a lot of people, and I know Coach Jason Simpson won't admit this, but Greensburg, a lot of people expected to be on the stage since basically from the beginning of the season. Norwell, on the other hand, a lot of people did not see this coming from the Norwell Knights. You look at this Norwell team; they went 23-5 last season, and this was a team that had Kenny Filling, who's now at Marion University, Kinsey Feast, now at St. Francis, Annabelle Johnson, Dakota Hubble. Dakota Hubble is now at Huntington University. You had, I believe it was Lily Norris, because now it's Addie Norris, but last year they had both Norris girls last season. So this year it's just Addie Norris for Norwell. And there were about 7 girls that graduated off of that team that went 23-5. They lost by 3 points at the hands of Gibson Southern, who moved up to 4A for this state tournament before falling to Lawrence North in the semi-state semifinal matchup. We'll talk about Lawrence North in a separate video when we talk about Warsaw and Lawrence North. Look at it in the team-by-team statistical categories. Greensburg has the edge in shooting percentage at 49% to 38%. 3-point percentage is very similar. We're talking 34 roughly for Norwell, 32 for Greensburg from 3-point range. Free throw percentage, Norwell with the edge at 74% to 68%. Rebound average is very close in favor of Norwell, 32.5 to 28. Points per game, both of these teams score at a high rate. Greensburg at 67.9, roughly 68. Norwell 65.6, roughly 66. Defensively, Norwell is giving up 47 points, but I don't think that number tells the whole story with their defense. This defense has been very good as of late, and I believe their last 10 games, Norwell has been averaging over 70 points per game and giving up below 40 points in the last 10 games. Greensburg has been consistent all year on both ends of the floor. 67.9 points per game offensively, giving up just 37.4 points per game defensively. Norwell plus 19-point differential. Greensburg 30.5 point differential, positive 30.5. Now, I would say when we talk about point differential, I would argue Norwell's strength of schedule has been superior to Greensburg. No offense to the Greensburg Pirates, but Norwell has been battle-tested all year long, whether it's their conference or their non-conference slated games. You know, I look back at their season up to this point. I look back and talking about their start to the season where I believe they went 3-3 at the start of the year. They played Homestead, they played Warsaw, they played Northridge. Those were their 3 losses to begin the season for the Norwell Knights, and then they played Indianapolis Cathedral, who made a nice run in the state tournament this year. Played Noblesville at Noblesville, and probably should have won that game. They lost in overtime. In that contest, played Snyder, who played in the regional. Noblesville played in regionals, if I recall. No, I'm sorry, they lost in sectionals. Take that back. And then they played Columbia City and Belmont. They lost those 2 in the regular season in conference play, and then avenged that loss in the postseason for the Norwell Knights. So this is a battle-tested Norwell team, and I do think the record for Norwell is very deceiving. And Greensburg I think they know this already, but Greensburg has to take Norwell very seriously in this matchup because this Norwell team is way, way tougher than that 22-6 record would indicate. Again, Norwell has been on this stage before. They were there just last year. They have been there one other time in their history, and that was 1977 when Terry Rosinski, Miss Indiana basketball recipient, led her team to the state finals. Well, at that time, it was the Final Four, and to which they were eliminated in the Final Four in 1977. And then last year, you had Kennedy Filling and Mackenzie Feast kind of leading the way for Norwell this season. Greensburg has been to state before, but that was back in 2018 for the Greensburg Pirates. And this is a different group now compared to the team from 2018. But Jason Simpson has been on the stage beyond the girls basketball program, as he was a part of 2 state championship teams on the boys' side in 2013 and 14. Again, Norwell has never won a basketball state championship, although their boys team did make it to the state one time, and that was in 2014, I believe it was. I want to say 2014, off the top of my head, for the Norwell Knights. And then obviously the 3 state championships in baseball obviously come to mind for the Norwell Knights. When we talked about the Norwell Knights, I think for a lot of people that don't know Norwell, and again, if you're from Northeast Indiana, you should know Norwell by now. 28 years, I should say. But nevertheless, it's been forever that we've come to know this Norwell program over the years. Again, 65 points per game. As you can see, it's a high octane offense. But really, when it comes to their offense, it really starts and ends with Vanessa Rossworm, who started off early on in her career as a kind of a wing. She's become a point guard this year, taking on a new and much larger role for Vanessa Rossworm, and she's thrived in that role this year, averaging 23 points, 7 rebounds, and 4 assists per game. That's not to mention her defense, where she's getting at least 2 or 3 steals per game as well, off the top of my head. 38% from the floor, but she does take a lot of shots. 32% from 3. 5'10" point guard. She's a lengthy, athletic, high-motored, extremely tough kid. That's one of the things that Greensburg fans are going to know right away. And when we talked about the 1-3-1, Rossworm's the top of that 1-3-1. So not only do you have to prepare for the 1-3-1, but you got to prepare for the 1-3-1 against Vanessa Rossworm at the top of that defense. That's very difficult for anybody, let alone for a team like Greensburg, who has been unscathed all year in terms of their record. But it goes beyond Vanessa Rossworm. Macy Saul-Frank's having one of the better turnaround seasons from one season to another in the state of Indiana, averaging 14 points per game, shooting 40% from the floor, 37% from 3, 3 rebounds per game is Macy Saul-Frank. Last year, she was essentially a full-time JV starter last year, really didn't play varsity at all last season, which is why most people didn't know who Macy Saul-Frank was until they saw Norwell play. And I had that conversation with Mason Asher back in December when he saw Norwell play Noblesville, and he's like, "Who are these kids?" And I said, "Well, these are Norwell players. These are really good athletes that don't get a lot of attention all the time because, it's Norwell. It's not like you're going to get all this information about this team compared to, say, Homestead or Warsaw or HSC, that neck of the woods." And then, obviously, when we talked about Norwell, we talked about their depth in terms of their guards. And again, you go down the list, Jada Dale, around 6 points per game, but she is such a vital piece, not just with her shooting, but also her defense. Very important player on that team. You got Isabella Swineford, who's kind of really molded herself as one of the more underrated players in the state of Indiana. 2 rebounds per game. That really doesn't tell you anything about Isabella Swineford as of late. She had 10 rebounds against Columbia City in the semi-state championship game. She was a vital part of Norwell's success defensively against this talented Columbia City team that had Addie Baxter and Nisa Tonkel and Tora Holler. And Leah Hurdle even had her moments as well for Columbia City. And Lainey Ziliak had her moments. Swineford was a big part of that in that championship game in semi-state. You also you go down the list, you have Ashley Wallman around 7 points per game, 32% from 3, 88% free throw shooter. That could be key in a matchup featuring 2 teams that like to play a physical, fast-paced style of basketball, and then adding Norris shooting 35% from 3. Norris and Wallman are, for the most part, they are primarily 3-point shooters, but they are vital to Norwell's success because of that. You know, you got Rossman 23, Saul Frank at 14, but then from there you got 7 and 6 and 5 and 3 and 2. Those points do add up eventually. And while Norwell is not as deep this year as they were a season ago, they're still deep enough. And I would say they are definitely deeper than Greensburg in terms of bodies. And even state finals experience, like that's huge. When you've been in the state 2 years in a row, that is huge in an atmosphere that is unlike anything you've seen all year, right? And they average 32 rebounds per game, which does surprise me a little bit. I didn't think they would still be averaging 30 rebounds per game, but I guess when you look at sophomore Olivia Green at 4.9 rebounds per game, I would say Olivia Green's a massive part of the success defensively in the interior. Addie Norris gets you 2 rebounds. Wellman gets you almost 3. Saul Frank gets you 3. Rostrom's at nearly 7 rebounds. Jada Dale almost 3. And then Swineford lately has become a vital piece on the glass. And then every once in a while you would have a Larkin Smith chip in. And you got Haley Williamson chipping in, although she doesn't grab as many rebounds as other players. Williamson can chip in here and there for the Norwell Knights. And that's why Norwell's so successful, is while their shooting numbers are not like ridiculously good this year, but they're still pretty good. Like 38% from the floor, 33.6% from 3. Those are pretty good 3-point shooting numbers in high school, especially when you look at the way in which high school sports, and especially basketball, have been these days. Obviously, with Norwell, they have been just a complete machine over the last 10 games. And I would say you look at Norwell in November, December versus January and February, they are 2 completely different teams. A lot of that should be credit to, obviously, the coaching staff, but more importantly, I think the players have done a really good job of adjusting throughout the season. And then we talk about kind of the media darlings of Class 3A, and that's the Greensburg Pirates. All season long, Greensburg has kind of had this, I don't want to say a target on their back per se, but I mean, Greensburg's kind of been the talk around the state all year. They have been far and away the best statistical team in 3A. They're one of the best teams statistically in the state, regardless of class. This is a school in the southeastern part of the state, located in Decatur County. School around 630 kids. Norwell is around 750. Pretty similar school sizes overall. And then Jason Simpson, much like Eric Thorne to a lesser extent, because Jason Simpson's only coached 11 years on this program compared to Eric's 28, but 207 and 65. Jason's done a phenomenal job with the Greensburg Pirates. And you look at this Greensburg team. It's a pretty young Greensburg team. You're looking at 3 seniors on this team. I mean, those are 3 amazing seniors for Greensburg in Emma McQueen, Miley Wilkinson, who scored her 1,000th point during the state tournament, and Leah West, who is going to be a menace in the post for Greensburg in this matchup, because Livy Green's going to have her hands full in this game against the senior power forward for Greensburg. Obviously, they score a lot of points, right? They got 4 players that average double figures. That's something that Greensburg has an advantage over Norwell. If a player like, say, Wilkerson doesn't play at her normal rate, you still have the sensational sophomore Claire Larison, who's going to be a Division I player in 2 years. No question about it. She is, no question to me, probably their most talented player they have in terms of pure talent. No, that's not to say Greensburg isn't talented. They're quite a talented team. Larison just really stands out in terms of the tape. And then Leah West, she's not a known primarily as a 3-point shooter, although she can stretch it out. But she is a darn good forward for this Greensburg team on both ends of the floor. And so this is going to be a challenging matchup for Norwell, because not only do you have to contain Larison, you gotta be able to contain Miley Wilkinson, both shooting very well. Even a kid like Emma McQueen, who doesn't get a lot of opportunities, but 38% from 3, that would make any opposing team nervous. Saying, hey, this Emma McQueen girl only takes 46 shots on the season, but she's making 38% of her threes. That's a concern right there, right? And then you got, Claire Larison, 47% from 3, 62% from the floor, is the 5'10" guard. pretty impressive number from Claire Larison. And, you got Larison and West and Wilkinson, who's one of their top playmakers alongside with Larison. And Allie Powers, another kid right there that maybe sometimes gets overlooked because of how deep this Greensburg starting lineup is. 3.8 assists, leading the Greensburg Pirates, 42% from the floor, 10 points per game. And then Mary Harmon, I should say, 6.6 points per game, 3.4 assists per game. She has been banged up of late, and I know she had an injury to which I don't know if they knew if she was going to be back this season. And I believe she even had surgery on this particular said injury, and still was able to come back in the tournament and still be able to contribute in some shape or form. So obviously, when you look at this matchup, obviously Norwell's defense is going to have their hands full. When you look at the starting 4 or 5, you got 4 players that can get you double figures for Greensburg. And you got Harmon who can contribute here and there. So you got around 5 players that can score. Now, while it's a good thing for Greensburg, it also means they don't have a super deep bench. In a game where it can be physical between these two teams, if said injury occurs, which we hope we never see it, we don't see injuries, we never want that, or if fouls become problematic for Greensburg, it could mean, you may have to put in a player that may not be familiar playing in this type of atmosphere against probably one of the hardest defenses to prepare for in Norwell's 1-3-1. And I'm emphasizing the 1-3-1 because it's not like your typical 1-3-1 zone defense. Again, Rostrum really makes things much more difficult for opposing offenses. So I just to put a closure on this matchup between these two teams, probably the first key I look at in this matchup is going to be, number one, the runs for both teams are going to be key. Which team can jump out to the lead early? Which team can sustain that lead in a longer stretch of time? Which team can limit their mistakes early? Because these both teams are going to make mistakes early because it's the big stage, especially for Greensburg. These Greensburg kids have never been on this stage before, so there's going to be some excitement and nerves for the Greensburg Pirates, who, again, they have not lost all year and they've essentially haven't been challenged for most of the year. So you do wonder how that start could look like for Greensburg. So which team can sustain their runs, which team can make their shots, right? Because I think if this is a game where it's a game of runs, you don't want to be in a situation where you're in a cold spell for 4 or 5 minutes in a game. In a game featuring two teams with good defenses, two talented teams, and then some talented offensive players, a scoring drought could be the difference between winning and losing a game. That's number one. Number two is going to be the offensive rebounds. Both teams are pretty similar in terms of their rebounding statistics. I think the one thing that could be an issue is, while I think both teams are relatively similar in terms of height overall, the front court size slightly favors Greensburg. And again, you're talking about Olivia Green from Norwell likely matching against Leah West, and you're talking about a 2 or 3 inch difference between these two players. That could be the difference right there between a defensive stop and an offensive rebound that goes in for 2 points or a foul. That's something to keep an eye on. Also, Greensburg, again, pretty athletic backcourt as well. So I think the big thing for these two teams is which team is going to be able to contribute on the offensive glass, I think, is going to be key. And then the third thing certainly is going to be which team's defense can limit the damage the best. Can Greensburg's offense be able to generate the level they normally would generate their offense against the 1-3-1? Does that chaotic zone defense alter their ability to get shots? Does it put a seed of doubt in this Greensburg backcourt? Because I think that's what Norwell's going to have to do if they want to have an opportunity to be successful in this game. And then for the perspective of Norwell, I think Norwell is going to have to be much more disciplined shooting the basketball in this game than they did against Columbia City in the second half. I know this for sure. And one of the concerning factors, I think, for Norwell, while they are back for the second year in a row, this is a different team from last year. I mean, if you still had Kennedy Filling and Mackenzie Feast and Dakota Hubble and Annabelle Johnson, obviously, we're talking a completely different situation here. But this is not that team. That was last year. This is a different team compared to last year's team. It's a team filled with sophomores and juniors. A lot of those kids that are playing big roles this year, other than Vanessa Rossworm, and I guess you can argue Jada Dale or Addie Norris or Ashley Woolman to some extent. I mean, most of these kids didn't really play that much at the varsity level last year. So that's something to really keep an eye on, is which team can generate a good start, which team's going to be able to generate best in a game of runs, who can generate offensive rebounds, and then which team's defense can alter the shot-making ability. I think those are things to keep an eye on. But I do think this is going to be a very competitive matchup. I think as long as Norwell can make their shots, I think this is going to be a competitive basketball game. But if Norwell struggles with their shots and they get sloppy, then Greensburg probably wins big. But I think there's a chance that this could be a game that goes one or two possessions, and maybe Norwell can squeak out a win. It could happen, but they're going to have to play well on both ends of the floor because this Greensburg team is talented. Their starting five is incredibly good, and they're very tough. Like, they definitely are not a finesse team. They play a good collective team game, and I think Norwell's going to have their hands full on Saturday. Thank you for watching the ANEC Sports Podcast. Please like this video and like the page ANEC Sports on YouTube. Let people know that the ANEC Sports is on YouTube. Also like our Facebook page at Around the Northeast Corner and follow either Around the Northeast Corner and Sam Frick on Twitter/X. We're also on Instagram as well. Just look for ANEC Sports or Around the Northeast Corner and you will find us there. You can also follow the man himself, Sam Frick, the founder and editor at Around the Northeast Corner, for other additional content. This has been an Around the Northeast Corner presentation.